Hello and welcome to another free code session. My name is Jason Bach and I need to move on with whenever and really calling it dub sharp because I'm going to start just doing it my way and mostly to just get to the point where I have everything implemented and this is finally done. So what I've decided to do is I struggled with this for a while and I was designing some things on pieces of paper and figuring out, like, how do we do these automated conversions, and how do I know that if I'm in a print, that the 2 needs to be a string, but if I pass in a 4 to defer, that you're actually trying to do an exists. And I'm like, this is nutty. This is ridiculous. And I started feeling like I'm designing another JavaScript and I did not want to do that, where the place where things are matters in terms of how they're converted or used. And I'm like, no, this is just dumb. So, and yes, the programs that currently exist out there, they can interpret it, and I get it. I mean, if I really wanted to do this, I thought, yeah, I could figure out if you're in a defer and you just have a numeric literal there that you end up really calling exists. And I sat there and I went, you know what though? That just does not feel like right. Like if you're in a print, like if I suddenly start saying, well, what I really want to do is print out, numbers that are combined together, then I do a string on them, but in other places I don't. I said, no. Nope. We're not going to do this. We're not going to, we're going to move on and build something that I thought at least has some sense. And if I take a program that currently exists, that it will give me compilation errors and I'll be able to figure out, okay, put this in here and put this in there. Okay, so one of the things I did is I put the conversion operators back in, string, integer. So if you put a string around a 4 or 42, it'll give you back a string of 42. I also said that in this case, defer takes a Boolean. Okay, so what happens in this case if you pass in a 4 is that just won't work. So you have to actually pass in exists of 4. And exists is another function you can call, which just maps to does line exist that I have in my engine. So with all this in place, then I said, you know what? I think we're almost close enough to actually start getting real programs in, because the only 2 things we need to implement now are again and defer. And they need to be handled, as I probably mentioned before, a little differently. I also have to keep in mind that I want to add in the mod operator. So before I forget, I'm going to put a to-do in my code. And let's be the parser. That's where I want to do it, or in the lexer. I think if I say in the lexer that, because I don't think I have the percentage anywhere. So what I want to put in here is say like to do consider adding in a mod operator. There. Okay, but that's not important right now. I also put in a to-do that says if you have like a line that is just this, that you have to have some statements after it. So if you put that in, that's actually an error, and we're going to put in some parsing error to say you didn't have, no statements are given for line and then that number. So actually, let's do that quick because that shouldn't take too long to do. Okay, so we're going to say if lines.count is equal to 0, then we're going to do a this.diagnostics add or report missing line statements. And if I remember right, when you report, the report does things like text span. Okay. So what we can do is report missing line statement of line number dot span, or yeah, and then line number dot. Where is this? Well, we can just do the line number. That's fine enough. Okay. All right. So then report missing line statement. Let's put that in there. Grab one that's like this, and then we'll say no line statements exist. So now what happens if I put this in? What I should see is, and then if I would do like print hi, let's say run, that's probably, yeah. Okay, well that was, here we go. This should be easy, and then it's not. Let's see if it gets, yes, all the way here. And we'll just put in 1 this time, because I bet that will trigger it. So we get the parse primary expression. Now give us a line number. Yep, and that's where it dies. Yep, okay, that's fine. So let's go back in the parse line expression statements, 12, and let's see what happens here. Okay. So we find, we say current line index, which should be 0, the current position, so, yeah, I don't think I handled a case where you literally just give me a semicolon. So if I say peak, it's not an identifier token, and I think, yeah, that's where it dies. Okay. All right. That's fine. So parse binary expression, because if, yeah, so how do I want to handle this? If you, for some reason, did this to me, well, let's actually see what parse binary expression is doing, because that's actually kind of weird. Yeah, line number. We already got the line number. Why would we? Oh, sorry. This is the actual line number for the expression that we're trying to do. Which, that's right. Okay. If we peek to say it's an identifier token, then we say expression statement syntax. If we peek and we say it's a literal token, then we know that we're trying to do like the 1, pound, 2, or just 1 itself. Okay. But what we should be doing here is saying else if this dot peek 0 dot kind is equal to a syntax kind of a literal, because I don't think you can just say numeric. Yeah, number. Well, you could say number token. Yeah, I think that would do it. Okay, now I need to say here though that else this diagnostics report unexpected line statement token. Right? I think that's a correct call. Or can we just say unexpected token? We don't know what we expect though. What we do, report unexpected lines. And then we need to say here, unexpected line statement token. Okay, now what would happen if we do this? Run. No line statements exist. Oh, because we've we're now trying to, yeah, okay. But at least it doesn't die. So, what we could do, arguably, if I look at this, is maybe, yeah, I mean, this is wrong, because either you give us a call or you give us a number token. So, something, maybe I'm overdoing it with the errors. I'm still not quite sure when you report a diagnostic or not. What would happen if we don't do this? So I think we're going to have the right case in that print hi run, no line statements exist. Okay, so but what could happen, okay, let's try this. If I said 1 and then some bad character input. Okay, so it wouldn't know what those were, because either we're going to give a number, and so yeah, now we don't report this, which is wrong. So if we put this back in, 1, hi, 1, 2, unexpected lines, yeah. So at least, I mean, it's not the prettiest, and I could think more about it, but we're not dying, right, anymore. And if we don't get at least those couple of things, we're going to say something to the effect of, hey, this isn't correct, something. And of course, it will also be wrong with the comma, because it's saying, hey, wait a minute, the comma was an unexpected token either as well. So, because we got screwed up with the first one. Okay, that's good enough. I think that's goodish enough. So we're going to keep that. All right, so now let's actually move to doing the again and the defer calls. Okay, so let me go back up here and look at entry. So we've got again, defer, this one's in there, this one's in there, that one's in there, that. Update count. Well, it technically is, because the 1 pound 2 would actually end up calling that. So these are literally the only ones we have left. Okay, so let's go to our symbols, built-in functions, and we're going to take an again. Okay, and this is again, and again takes a boolean. And there are moments where I wish I had a soundproof room in this house and I could just completely escape. Had to handle another situation at home. Yeah, the staying in house all the time, it's something I can manage relatively well, but kids, we've got to force them to do more stuff, because otherwise they're going to start going even battier and just, yeah. So where was I? All right, again takes should keep. So we'll just, this is a boolean, and it returns a boolean. Yes, okay. And then we're going to put in defer right away, since we're here. and this is called defer. And defer takes a should defer, which is a Boolean, and returns a Boolean. There. So, yeah. Now the only thing is in our execution engine here, I can call does line exist. Okay, but the way the execution engine works is that we're giving it, like if I come back here and I go to the 99 bottles of beer, when I build a line, I'm actually putting in some of the logic around defer. Okay. What I really should probably arguably do is, like, if I come to the engine here and it says execute, because this essentially, what does this actually do? Yeah, it says take the line and take the code and say just execute it, or just take the code itself is what needs to be executed, and what is executed is actually what you're passing in as code here. Okay, so line is the code, and it's taking the engine to call the methods, and that's all it does. But it actually puts the logic of what you're doing in here. So what I need to think about here for a second is, where should that actually live? Because if you look at another program here, Fibonacci sequence, again, is just called, okay? And defer should arguably just be called, okay? But the way the engine works is it says, here's here's all the methods that you can call, but when I execute your code, I'm expecting you to actually have the right implementation. Which, when I actually emit IL, I will actually be doing, like, I'm going to put an if statement in there. This is something I thought about last night too, which is, I technically have been ignoring all the stuff that Mo has been going through on his Mints compiler about break, continue, if, while, for, and everything else, because there is no need for it, other than arguably here. Okay? Which is, if you have a defer, that means everything after the defer shouldn't happen. So here's the thing I'm wondering. Should I really just change this into saying call action defer? Okay. And yes, that returns a Boolean to say whether you should defer or not. But is it the responsibility of the thing calling it to know if you call defer that you should not, well, if defer returns a false, that means don't defer. So keep doing the rest of the stuff after. Again is just a marker. Again is just, I called it, and that's just a way to say, do this again, essentially, or not. Okay. So, I have a debate in my head. Again is just a simple call. It just has meaning when the line is actually executed to say whether do you keep it on the line, whether you keep it around or not. Defer actually has an if around it. So is it the responsibility of the engine itself to say any statements that occur after defer, after a deferred call that return true, should just not be executed? Or does the actions itself determine whether you actually call that or not? Because here's what I'm getting at, just to be really clear. What I'm proposing is saying And so you literally execute, again, defer, update count, update count, update count. But the engine, when it's executing a line, will have two flags, like what the engine has right now, where it is here. Okay, there are these should statement be deferred, should statement be kept. Okay, and so what I should arguably do is say, put barriers around, well, not does line exist. See, this is also the tricky thing. These are just method calls. They don't really know. They could be in the context of an again. They could be in the context of a defer. And I don't necessarily know that. An N could be called within a defer. A U could be called within a defer. You can't do an update count because that actually exists outside of a again and a defer call. So, and it's interesting because it seems like when I was looking at the documentation that if I go to again and defer, so yeah, defer and again actually, they only do something based on the value. They don't actually return anything. So, but I can also call N and U outside of a defer or an again. So this is now getting to be another point of something I really didn't think of very well. How do I determine that I should actually call these things? Is it the responsibility of the engine to somehow know this? Or is it the responsibility of me passing in a line of code to actually put like an implicit if around everything? Well, yeah, I can't change the signature just yet either. I thought, well, these actually will not return anything. They'll return void because they're just markers. But we can't actually mark a N or a U or any of these methods automatically. We don't know if they're in the context of another call. I mean, you can see N here is within a defer, so you have to let it happen. Here, you may or may not, because defer, all this line statement here, that in and of itself is going to say whether you do it or not. Okay. So I think I just maybe answered my question, which is, you have, if I remember right, the way I define a line is, I think I have this in my head now, which is the engine should expose those two flags. Again and defer won't return anything. Okay. And these here essentially need to check, do I call this? Now you can check each individual one, but here you can say, well, I did a defer, so I'm responsible for now saying, update count. You, like N1 here, yeah. I'm babbling here, but I know what I'm trying to get at is if I go back to, let's see, syntax. No, those are the tests. A line statement syntax. Okay, so line statement syntax just has a bunch of lines. Okay, and a line statement has the number and also a bunch of statements. Okay, so each statement would have to say If I'm calling again, that's fine. Again just gets called. I'm just flagging it in the engine. I just need to return that to a void. Okay, so that's fine. The only one that's a pain in the butt here is defer. Because if I say defer, I just call it, but then every subsequent statement executed from this needs to say, should I actually run? Okay, and then when all the statements are done, then I do the logic around again. I believe that is actually correct. Okay, so if should statement be kept, where is again in here? Okay, so that is the only place. And then every time we go through, we just, yeah. So if we want to keep this concept of the execution engine, we have to be smart enough to say, handling the defer determines whether you should do anything after it or not. Okay, and we have discrete line statements. So each one would basically say, if we look at this, should statement be deferred? If that's false, then we actually execute what's after it. Okay, so that would be in the evaluator. The evaluator would just look at each line or each statement, and after each statement say, because when you're going through this, yeah, they're always false. So as long as each statement, that flag is not true. So if it's false, then we execute the next line. Okay, it just so happens if you, not the next line statement, it's just so if you actually call defer and that returns true, then every statement executed after that is not going to happen. Okay, so, and you could, yes, do what I just did, which put a big if statement around everything and say, if that's now true, then you wouldn't do any of those. You wouldn't even try to execute any of those. And I think if I come to my evaluator, and if I come to, I'm going to call line statements, hit the line number, and then for each statement and line statements, you're going to evaluate each statement. Okay. This is where I could say in the line statement, in the for each, if the current flag is false, then actually evaluate it. Otherwise, don't. Okay. And then when I come out of the for each, if it's again, see, this is also something that if I look at the engine, I think this might be wrong. If this should be kept. If I come back here, and if I look at it again, yeah, this just flags it to say whether you should or shouldn't. And I think the only reason I don't see this bug is because if I look at, yeah, defer doesn't do anything with it. Again does. This just says whether I should put it on or not. Let me actually do something here. I think this might be a bug. This might be a bug. Okay, so before we do any real damage here, let's turn this off that way. Okay. I think I should only be looking at should statement be kept. Okay, so the deferred actually is never really even used. If I look at this, yeah, I set it within defer. I then set it to false. I use it here, and I set it to false. I'm assuming that the caller is actually using it. Okay, and yeah, this is the way this engine works. I'm not sure if that's the way I want to do it. So, okay, so let's come back over here. Let's make this our startup. Go into our program here, and let's just run Fibonacci, and let's see what happens. Bad stuff. Okay, well, that didn't actually work the way I intended it to. Okay, what am I doing wrong here? Let me read this again. So if we go to again, if we passed in true, that would flip it to true. Okay. If the argument is true, same as execute remains on the to-do list to be executed sometime later. The argument is false, the same as executed. So I'm wondering if maybe that's the right logic. No, that's even worse. That does nothing. So now I'm really confused myself. Because the defer shouldn't matter. But it does. I'm going to stop here because now I've hit another conundrum, which is I don't understand what I'm doing. So I need to think about this for a little bit. So thank you all for watching. Leave comments and questions below. See you in the next episode.